The night was dark, and the air was thick with the smell of diesel fuel. It was just after midnight on June 24, 1977, in Madison, Wisconsin. A gas station attendant, alone and scared, was being roughed up by two young toughs. They had him cornered, and things were about to turn ugly. Suddenly, a black limousine pulled up. The back door swung open, and out jumped a large man in a tracksuit and oversized sunglasses. He strode toward the bullies, assuming a karate pose. The young men froze, their eyes widening in disbelief. It was Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. Elvis looked like he was ready to fight. He had just arrived in Madison for a concert that evening, and was on his way to his hotel when he saw the altercation. Without a second thought, he jumped out of the car and rushed to the attendant's aid. The bullies, recognizing the famous singer, backed away. They were as stunned as the attendant, who couldn't believe his eyes. Elvis didn't just stand there. He hung around, talking to the police officers who had accompanied his limousine. He shook hands with everyone, even the bullies, and posed for pictures. One of the police officers in his security detail later told a reporter he was willing to fight. That was the bad part. But Elvis wasn't just showing off. He was a man who believed in using his fame for good, even if it meant risking his own safety. This incident was just one of many that made Elvis Presley a legend. But it also revealed a side of him that was rarely seen in the glare of the spotlight. Despite his fame, he still felt a strong connection to his roots, to the values of the small-town South where he grew up. He saw himself as a good guy, someone who could make a difference, even if it was just by helping a gas station attendant in the middle of the night. Elvis was born in Tupelo, Mississippi, on January 8, 1935. His early life was marked by poverty and hardship. His family lived in a two-room shotgun house, and his father, Vernon, worked odd jobs to make ends meet. Elvis's mother, Gladys, was a loving and protective figure who doted on him. She and Vernon raised Elvis to be polite, respectful, and God-fearing. They wanted him to be different from the white trash they saw around them, to have a better life. When Elvis was 13, his family moved to Memphis, Tennessee. It was in Memphis that Elvis's life began to change. He discovered the music of the blues and country, and he started playing guitar. His unique style, a blend of different musical influences, caught the attention of Sun Records, a small label run by Sam Phillips. In 1954, Elvis recorded his first single, That's All Right, and it was an instant hit. The song launched his career and made him a sensation, but success came at a price. As Elvis's fame grew, so did the pressure. He was constantly in the public eye, and the media scrutinized every move he made. He struggled to maintain his privacy and his sense of self. Despite his wealth and fame, he often felt isolated and disconnected from the world he had left behind. Yet, even as he became a global superstar, Elvis never forgot where he came from. He still saw himself as the boy from Mississippi who had made good. And he believed that with his fame came a responsibility to help others, to be a positive influence. That's why he didn't hesitate to jump out of his limo and help a stranger in need. It was a moment that defined him, a moment that showed the world the real Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley's early life was shaped by the world around him, a world that was still very much rooted in the past. Born in a small, two-room shotgun shack in East Tupelo, Mississippi, on January 8, 1935, Elvis grew up in a place where the echoes of the 19th century were still loud and clear. His parents, Vernon and Gladys Presley, were young, poor, and uneducated, but they were part of a tight-knit community where family and neighbors played a crucial role in daily life. Tupelo, a town that had grown from a dusty crossroads to a bustling commercial center, was a mix of progress and poverty. The city had modern amenities like electricity, factories, and a radio station, but many residents, especially those in East Tupelo, lived in conditions that were barely a step up from sharecropping. The area where Elvis grew up was among the poorest, with crude shacks, no running water, and limited job opportunities. Vernon and Gladys had both left school early to work. Gladys, known for her beauty and spirit, worked at the Tupelo garment plant, sewing shirts alongside other young women. Vernon, quieter and less ambitious, worked as a laborer and sharecropper for a local farmer named Orville Bean. Bean owned much of the land around East Tupelo and provided work for families like the Presleys. Despite their struggles, Vernon and Gladys had support from their extended family, including Vernon's uncle Noah, who owned a grocery store and drove the school bus, and Gladys's uncle Gaines, who became a preacher at the local Assembly of God church. Elvis's birth was a bittersweet event. He was one of twins, but his brother Jesse Garin was stillborn and buried in an unmarked grave. This loss left a deep mark on the family, and Elvis was often reminded of his brother's memory, which he believed had a mystical significance. As he grew up, Elvis developed a strong sense of family and community, values that would shape his personality and career. Tupelo in the 1930s was a place of contrast. The town's growth brought new opportunities, but it also brought economic hardships. The Great Depression hit hard, and many people, including Elvis's parents, struggled to make ends meet. The New Deal programs, like the Works Progress Administration (WPA), provided some relief, but wages were low, and jobs were scarce. The town's African-American population, living in a segregated area called Shake Rag, faced even greater challenges, with limited access to good jobs and basic services. Despite these struggles, Elvis's early years were filled with music and religion. The Assembly of God Church, where the family attended services, was a central part of their lives. The music he heard there, along with the blues and country music of the region, would later influence his unique style. The sense of community and the values of hard work, family, and faith that he learned in Tupelo stayed with him throughout his life. As Elvis grew, he began to show the charisma and talent that would later make him a superstar. But the world he came from, with its mix of poverty, community, and cultural richness, was always a part of him. The experiences of his early years in Tupelo and later in Memphis, where his family moved when he was a teenager, shaped his inclusive and democratic sensibility, making him a performer who could connect with people from all walks of life. This sensibility, combined with his extraordinary talent, would eventually propel him to the top of the music industry. The Presleys were a tight-knit family, and as an only child, Elvis was the center of their world. They lived in a community where family and kin played a crucial role. Vernon, Elvis's father, often had to leave town to find work, and during those times, the extended family stepped in to help. The Presleys found solace in their church, a Pentecostal congregation that was known for its enthusiastic and emotional worship. The church services were filled with singing, clapping, and speaking in tongues, creating a powerful and democratizing environment where everyone felt the presence of the Holy Spirit, regardless of their social status. The Pentecostal faith was especially comforting during hard times, and the Presleys experienced their share of struggles. In November 1937, Vernon, along with Gladys's brother Travis, was arrested for altering a check to buy a hog. They were convicted and sent to Parchman Prison, a place known for its harsh conditions. Without Vernon's income, the family lost their home and had to move in with relatives. Gladys and Elvis visited Vernon in prison, enduring long bus rides to spend a few hours with him. This experience was traumatic for Elvis and deepened his bond with his mother. It also made the Presleys more determined to achieve respectability and avoid the label of white trash. When Vernon was released, he took a job with the Works Progress Administration, and the family was able to rent a place of their own. As the United States geared up for World War II, Vernon found better-paying jobs that required him to travel. This exposure to new opportunities made him realize that there were better prospects outside of Tupelo, in places like Memphis and Gulfport. In 1943, the family moved to the Gulf Coast for a brief period, but they returned to Tupelo after a month, missing their home. Back in Tupelo, Vernon found a job as a deliveryman for a local grocer, and the family gained some stability. They were able to buy a small house on Berry Street in East Tupelo. During these years, Elvis was spoiled and encouraged to feel special. He was close to his mother, who was always watching out for him and worrying about his safety. Despite their limited means, the Presleys raised Elvis to be polite and respectful, and he made a good impression on teachers and authority figures. Music was a significant part of Elvis's life. He was first exposed to it at church, where he learned to sing and appreciate gospel music. Like many white Southerners, he also became a fan of country music, which was popular in Tupelo. He would often listen to local musicians and aspiring professionals on the radio and at live performances. At the age of 10, Elvis won 5th prize in a children's talent show, singing Old Shep a cappella. This success encouraged him, and he received a guitar for his 11th birthday. He quickly learned to play and started taking his guitar everywhere, even to school, where he would perform for his classmates. Music provided Elvis with a sense of joy and accomplishment, but it couldn't shield him from the economic challenges his family faced. By the summer of 1946, Vernon found it increasingly difficult to supplement his income, and the family had to move to a rental close to Shake Rag, a predominantly black neighborhood. Living close to African American culture, Elvis developed a deeper appreciation for it. He was exposed to the music and the hardworking, God-fearing people in his new community, which influenced his attitude toward race and contributed to his unique musical style. By November 1948, the Presleys decided to move to Memphis, a city that offered better job opportunities and a more vibrant environment. Memphis was booming, with a growing manufacturing sector and a diverse population. The city was a cultural melting pot, where people from different backgrounds came together, and new urban industrial ways of life emerged. For the Presleys, Memphis represented a chance for a better future. They sold their furniture, packed their belongings, and set out for a new beginning. Memphis was a city of opportunities, with higher wages and more leisure time, allowing people to enjoy the city's many attractions, from restaurants and nightclubs to theaters and music venues. For Elvis, this move would be a pivotal moment, leading him to the path that would make him a musical icon. The Presleys found a new home in a rooming house, near where Gladys's brother Travis and his family had moved. Vernon and Gladys both found jobs, Vernon at a munitions factory and Gladys as a sewing machine operator. They enrolled Elvis in the 8th grade at Humes High School, but on his first day, he was so overwhelmed by the big classes and bustling environment that he came home after less than an hour, feeling nervous and bug-eyed. But he soon adapted, just as his parents did to their new surroundings. Living in a single room with a shared hall bath was tough, so the Presleys applied for public housing. After a 4-month wait and an interview with a social worker who thought they were very nice and deserving, they moved into the Lauderdale courts in September 1949. For $35 a month, they got a 2-bedroom apartment with a living room and their own bathroom. Gladys was thrilled, and the apartment became a gathering place for the extended family. Billy Smith, Elvis's cousin, remembered that Gladys was always happy, laughing and making the place feel like home. The courts were a vibrant community of young families and teenagers eager to make the most of their new lives in Memphis. The location was perfect. Main Street, with its stores and movie theaters, was just 2 blocks away. The city's commercial district and the lively Beale Street were also within walking distance. This made it easy for the Presleys to shop and for Elvis to explore the city. Elvis's new life in Memphis offered him more freedom than he had in Tupelo. Despite Gladys's attempts to keep him on a tight leash, Memphis had a lot to offer. He made new friends in the courts and they played football, explored downtown, and went to the movies together. Beale Street was a favorite spot, where Elvis would window shop at the Lansky Brothers men's store, marveling at the flashy clothes that musicians like B.B. King and Rufus Thomas wore. Life in the courts brought stability and better opportunities. Vernon found a new job close to home, and Gladys became a nurse's aide at a nearby hospital. Elvis also started working, first as a movie theater usher, and later as a drill press operator at a munitions plant where his uncle Travis worked. However, in 1953, they had to move out of the courts because their income exceeded the limit for public housing. They rented an apartment across the street, allowing Elvis to stay connected with his friends. Elvis's interest in music grew in Memphis. He discovered that some of the boys in the courts played instruments, and he joined their jam sessions. He learned new songs and guitar techniques from the older guys. The radio was a big part of his musical education. Memphis stations played a wide range of music, from gospel and country to mainstream pop and R&B. He especially enjoyed WDIA, known as the mother station of the Negroes, where he and his friends would listen to B.B. King and other R&B artists. Dewey Phillips's late-night show on WHBQ, which featured the latest rhythm and blues, was also a favorite. Elvis frequented record stores like Poplar Tunes and Charlie's, where he could listen to records even if he couldn't afford to buy them. He developed a deep knowledge of R&B and continued to love gospel, which was a big part of family gatherings. He enjoyed attending the all-night gospel singings at Ellis Auditorium, where he was particularly fond of the Statesmen, a gospel group known for their flashy performances and innovative style. Elvis's musical tastes were unique for a white teenager. While most of his peers stuck to country, gospel, and mainstream pop, he embraced R&B. This interest in black music was becoming more common among working-class white teens, who were drawn to the energy and expressiveness of R&B. For many, it was a way to assert their individuality and separate themselves from their parents and more conservative peers. As Elvis became more comfortable in Memphis and at Humes, he started to assert himself. With both parents working and his own earnings from part-time jobs, he had more freedom. He played music with friends, went to movies, and hung out at record stores. He also began to cultivate a distinctive look, growing sideburns and styling his hair into a pompadour. He bought flashy clothes, often from Lansky's, and modeled his appearance after truck drivers, Captain Marvel Jr., and Hollywood stars like Tony Curtis. This look was modern and urban, reflecting his new life in Memphis and the consumer culture of post-war America. Elvis's new appearance worried some family members, like his aunt and uncle, who feared he would face backlash for his style. Vernon and Gladys were likely concerned too, but they loved him unconditionally. Despite the risks, Elvis's new look allowed him to express his individuality without rebelling openly. It was a visual statement of his identity and his connection to the vibrant, diverse world of Memphis. Elvis's high school years at Humes were a mix of hardship and hope. His unique style with long hair and flashy clothes made him an easy target for bullies, especially the jocks who ruled the school. Red West, who later became one of Elvis's closest friends, remembered, "It was that hair. It got him into all kinds of trouble." The jocks mocked him relentlessly and even threatened to cut his hair, but Elvis refused to back down. He wasn't a star athlete or an honor roll student, but he was determined to stand out in his own way. He stuck close to his few friends, and his warm and polite nature eventually won over some of his classmates. Despite the challenges, Elvis's talent began to shine through during his senior year. At the school's talent show, the annual Minstrel, he sang and played the guitar. To everyone's surprise, his performance was well received. This marked a turning point. Elvis started bringing his guitar to school events, and a small group of students began to gather around him, listening to his heartfelt ballads. The Humes yearbook even listed him as someone who might become a singing hillbilly. After graduating in June 1953, Elvis faced the pressures of adulthood. He had already worked part-time at a furniture factory, but he had to quit because he was falling asleep in class. With his father, Vernon, struggling with back problems, Elvis knew he needed to find a steady job to support the family. He applied for various positions and eventually landed a job at Precision Tool. However, the job was unfulfilling, and his co-workers continued to tease him about his hair. He quit in March 1954 and found a new job with Crown Electric, where he delivered electrical supplies around Memphis. The Tiplers, his employers, became like a second family to him and encouraged him to go to night school to become an electrician. This seemed like a promising path to a stable and respectable future. Around this time, Elvis met Dixie Locke, a sophomore at a rival high school, at a church function. They quickly became close, and Elvis often brought his guitar on their dates, serenading her with popular songs and blues. Dixie's family approved of Elvis, seeing him as a modest and respectful young man. They attended church together and shared a love for gospel music, often going to all-night gospel singings at Ellis Auditorium. Elvis and Dixie even talked about getting married after she graduated in 1956. Despite the growing stability in his personal life, Elvis had a dream that had been simmering for years. He wanted to become a professional musician. The idea had taken root when he and his friends from the courts started playing music together and realized the vibrant music scene in Memphis. The city was full of opportunities for musicians, and country and gospel stars were local celebrities. However, the chances of making it in the music business were slim, and Elvis's parents wanted him to pursue a secure career. But after his successful performance at the Humes Talent Show, Elvis felt inspired to take a chance. In the summer of 1953, shortly after graduation, Elvis visited the Memphis Recording Service. He paid $3.98 to record an acetate, but his real goal was to be noticed by Sam Phillips, the owner of the studio and the fledgling Sun Records. Phillips, a visionary from Alabama, had a deep love for black music and was determined to bring it to a wider audience. He had opened his studio to record all kinds of black music, from blues to R&B, and was starting to make a name for himself. Elvis, ambitious and determined, saw this as his chance to be discovered. He wanted to show Phillips his talent, and perhaps get a break in the music industry. Elvis's visit to the Memphis Recording Service was a pivotal moment. It was the first step toward a future that would soon change his life forever. By 1953, Sam Phillips was convinced that black R&B music had a special appeal for many white teenagers. He believed that the rigid racial boundaries in the music world were starting to break down. When these barriers fell, he thought, white Southerners would not only listen to black music, but also appreciate its rich history. This, in turn, would help bring the races closer together and allow all Southerners to embrace their shared culture. Sam noticed that radio shows like Dewey Phillips's Red, Hot, and Blue were gaining popularity, and more young whites were buying R&B records and visiting clubs on Beale Street. But were these just passing fads? Would they really lead to such significant changes? Sam knew the South was deeply racist, and many white leaders were determined to keep things the way they were. Still, Sam remained hopeful. He believed that the influence of black music on country music was already evident, even if most whites didn't realize it. He was sure that the barriers to white acceptance of black music were artificial and would eventually fall. To make this happen, Sam thought he needed to find a white musician who could sing with the Negro sound and feel, someone who could bridge the gap and make R&B accessible to a wider audience. Months went by, and Sam kept searching. Then in July 1953, a young man named Elvis Presley walked into the Memphis Recording Service. Elvis was shy and polite, and he asked Marion Kasker, Sam's assistant, if he could record an acetate. When it was his turn, Elvis sang two ballads, My Happiness and That's When Your Heartaches Begin. His voice was interesting, but not outstanding. Sam told Elvis they might call him, and Marion wrote down his name and address. But weeks and months passed, and Sam didn't call. Elvis didn't give up. He kept visiting the studio, chatting with Marion, and asking about bands that needed a singer. In January 1954, he recorded another acetate, hoping to remind Sam of his talent. Again, nothing happened. Elvis tried out for a junior gospel quartet called the Songfellows, but was rejected. He also auditioned for a country band led by Eddie Bond, but was turned down again. These rejections were tough for Elvis, but he didn't lose hope. By June 1954, Elvis was working as a truck driver for Crown Electric and spending most of his free time with his girlfriend, Dixie. Life was routine, and it seemed like his music dreams might never come true. But on June 26, 1954, Marion Kasker called Elvis and asked him to come to the studio. Sam had a new song called Without You and wanted to see if Elvis could do it. They worked on it for hours, but it just wasn't working. Sam decided to try something different and called in Scotty Moore, a guitarist, and Bill Black, a bassist, to play with Elvis. On July 3rd, Scotty and Bill met Elvis at Scotty's house. At first, Elvis seemed shy and insecure, but they started playing some ballads. Scotty called Sam later and said Elvis had a good voice but wasn't anything special. Still, Sam was determined and scheduled a recording session for the next day, July 5th. Elvis, Scotty, and Bill arrived at the studio around 7. They played two ballads over and over, but it wasn't going well. Everyone was tired and frustrated. Sam called a break, and the guys relaxed. Suddenly, Elvis started singing and moving around, and Bill joined in. Scotty started playing too, and the whole mood changed. Sam heard this from the control booth and asked them to play it again. This was the moment Sam had been waiting for. Elvis had found his unique sound, and it was infectious. Sam knew he had found the white musician who could bring black R&B to a wider audience. The rest, as they say, is history. Elvis Presley's life changed the night he stumbled into Sun Studios. Sam Phillips, the studio owner, was amazed when Elvis began singing Arthur Crudup's That's All Right, an R&B song from the 1940s. Elvis's rendition was unlike anything Sam had heard before. It was full of energy and playfulness, blending the spirit of black music with a unique twist. Sam could see that Elvis had a deep appreciation for R&B, even though he hadn't shown it in his earlier auditions. Excited by what he heard, Sam and the band, including Scotty Moore and Bill Black, worked on the song over and over. They refined it, and when they played it back, everyone was shocked. It was a blues song, but it didn't sound like any blues they had heard before. It wasn't country, and it wasn't the kind of music white musicians usually made. Scotty, Bill, and Elvis joked nervously that people might run them out of town, but Sam was thrilled. He knew this was the sound he had been searching for, a sound that could bridge the gap between black and white music in the South. The next evening, they returned to the studio to work on new material, but the session felt less exciting after the breakthrough with That's All Right. Sam was already planning how to promote the song. He decided to take it to Dewey Phillips, a popular DJ on WHBQ's Red, Hot, and Blue show. Dewey and Sam were friends, and Dewey could be counted on to play Son's recordings. Sam played the tape for Dewey, who was initially unsure if he should play it, worried about how his mostly black audience would react. But by the next morning, Dewey had made up his mind and called Sam for 2 acetates. That evening, Elvis tuned in to the radio, telling his parents not to change the station. But he was too nervous, and went to the movies instead. His parents and grandmother, who lived with them, stayed by the radio. When Dewey announced Elvis's song, the response was immediate. The phone lines at the station lit up with calls and telegrams, demanding the song be played again. Dewey played That's All Right over and over, and people both black and white loved it. They didn't care about the singer's race, they just liked what they heard. Dewey tried to get Elvis to come to the studio for an interview. When Elvis was found at the movies, his parents rushed him to the station. Elvis was terrified, but Dewey put him at ease and started the interview without warning. During the conversation, Dewey asked Elvis where he went to high school, revealing to the listeners that the singer was white. By the end of the night, many Memphians knew about the breakthrough and what it meant for the racial divide. The next day, they recorded a B-side for the single. They tried several songs, but nothing seemed to work. Then Bill began playing Blue Moon of Kentucky, a bluegrass standard. When Scotty and Elvis joined in, they transformed it into a fast, upbeat version. Sam encouraged them to refine the sound, pushing them to create something entirely original. The single, with That's All Right as the A-side and Blue Moon of Kentucky as the B-side, was released a few days later. It quickly became a hit, and by the end of October, over 6,000 copies had been sold in Memphis. Sam knew that getting airplay outside Memphis would be harder. He traveled throughout the South, trying to get radio stations to play Elvis's songs. While DJ at stations targeting African Americans were receptive, many country DJ were hostile, finding the music too black or too white. Sam realized that live performances were the key to overcoming these obstacles. He arranged for Elvis to open for the Starlight Wranglers at the Bon Air nightclub. Despite his nerves, Elvis performed well, and Sam saw his potential as a live act. Bob Neal, a local DJ, agreed to put Elvis on the bill for a hillbilly hoedown at the Overton Park Shell. The headliner was Slim Whitman, and the audience was all white. Elvis was terrified, but when he stepped on stage and started playing That's All Right, he began to move with the music. His leg shaking and bouncing around the stage caught everyone's attention. At first, he thought the audience was laughing at him, but when they started cheering, he gained confidence. By the second song, Blue Moon of Kentucky, the crowd was wild, and Elvis was called back for an encore. That night, Elvis learned that his stage presence could electrify an audience. His performance at the Overton Park Shell was just the beginning of his journey to becoming a musical legend. Elvis's journey from a local Memphis sensation to a regional star is a story of hard work, determination, and the power of music to break down barriers. After his triumphant performances at Overton Park and the Eagle's Nest, Elvis, along with his bandmates Scotty Moore and Bill Black, found themselves playing to bigger and more enthusiastic crowds. Their music, a unique blend of country and rhythm and blues, was unlike anything people had heard before. It was energetic, bold, and appealed to a new generation of listeners, especially white teenagers who were looking for something fresh and exciting. The success of their first record, with songs like That's All Right and Blue Moon of Kentucky, caught the attention of local radio stations and music critics. Elvis's flamboyant style, his pink and black outfits, his dynamic stage presence set him apart from other country musicians. People began to call him the Hillbilly Cat, a nickname that highlighted the hybrid nature of his music and his rebellious image. This unique identity only made him more attractive to fans who were ready for something new. As word of Elvis's performances spread, he and his band played at the grand opening of a suburban shopping center. Hundreds of teenagers, many of whom had heard Elvis on the radio, flocked to see him perform on the back of a flatbed truck. The crowd's response was even more intense than at Overton Park, showing that Elvis and his band had connected with a whole new audience. Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun Records, saw the potential in Elvis and worked tirelessly to get him more exposure. He arranged for Elvis to perform on the Grand Ole Opry, a prestigious country music show in Nashville. Although the Opry audience's response was lukewarm, Phillips didn't give up. He then secured a spot for Elvis on the Louisiana Hayride, a radio show that was more open to new and unconventional acts. This proved to be a better fit for Elvis, and he quickly became a regular, performing weekly and gaining a wider audience. With the help of Bob Neal, a local DJ and promoter, Elvis and the Blue Moon Boys, as they were now known, began to tour more frequently, playing in high schools and small towns across the South. Their reputation grew, and they started to appear on package tours with other country stars, introducing their unique sound to even more listeners. This exposure helped Elvis gain legitimacy, and made it easier for white teenagers to embrace his music. During this time, Elvis and the band returned to Sun Studios, often to record new material. Their second single, Good Rockin' Tonight, became a staple of their live performances, and their third single, Milk Cow Blues Boogie, further solidified their unique sound. Each new release received more airplay than the last, and their music was becoming a hit in several southern cities. The music Elvis and his band created at Sun Records was groundbreaking. It drew from both country and R&B traditions, but was entirely new, combining the energy and spirit of both genres. Songs like Baby Let's Play House and Mystery Train were not just covers. They were reimagined with a raw, infectious energy that captivated audiences. Elvis's influence extended beyond his music. His style, both in dress and performance, set a new standard for white performers. He showed that it was possible to be wild, exciting, and true to oneself, breaking the conventions of the time. His success inspired other young musicians, like Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee Lewis, to follow in his footsteps and create their own unique sounds. Sam Phillips played a crucial role in shaping Elvis's early career. He provided a safe space for Elvis and the band to experiment and develop their sound. Phillips's belief in Elvis's talent and his willingness to push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in music were instrumental in Elvis's rise to fame. By early 1955, Elvis and the Blue Moon Boys were established regional stars. They were earning a good living from their performances and recordings, and their music was reaching a broader audience. Elvis's journey from a young singer in Memphis to a regional sensation was just the beginning. His unique blend of country and R&B, his charismatic stage presence, and the unwavering support of Sam Phillips set the stage for what would become a legendary career. Elvis Presley's early success was not just a story of musical talent, but also of the power of innovation and the courage to be different. His music and his impact on popular culture would continue to grow, inspiring generations of musicians and fans around the world.